Tonight on Scope, with a record number of registered sex offenders living in the community in England and Wales, is Sarah's law protecting our children? Welcome to the show. The NSPCC claim 3 offences are committed against children every hour. With over 40,000 registered sex offenders living in the community in England and Wales, is Sarah's law really helping parents and carers safeguard their children? Well, tonight I'm joined by Chris Tuck from the charity Survivors of Abuse, which helps support adult victims of emotional, physical and sexual abuse to transform their lives. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. I want to talk to you about your concerns about Sarah's law as it currently stands.
Well, my main concern is that the vast majority of sex offenders are unknown. So it's great that we have a list, but because they are unknown, the majority of sex offenders who haven't been caught, what do we do about them?
Well, we're going to be discussing those issues in a moment. But first, we hear from a victim of childhood sexual assault. So Scope's Louis Holder has this report.
So from the ages of 6 till about 12, my mum and her boyfriend abused me, my sister and my stepbrother. I don't know, to have someone so close to you that you have so much trust and love in turn around and realise that they did that to you throughout your whole childhood, it's just sickening.
According to the NSPCC, there are currently over 57,000 children identified as needing protection from abuse in the UK. Furthermore, it is estimated that for every child needing protection from abuse, another 8 are suffering from it. Reports of sexual offences have increased sharply, with the numbers of children in the Child Protection Scheme also increasing.
16 years ago, on the 1st of July, 8-year-old Sarah Payne was on her way home from school when she was abducted, assaulted and murdered by Roy Whitting. Although Whitting had previously been convicted of sexual offence, he was released from his 5-year imprisonment after merely 2.5 years. The Payne family argued that not only was this an exploitation of the legal system, but if they had been aware of his previous offence, then their daughter's death could have been avoided.
The purpose of the Sex Offender Register is to enable agencies to identify where sex offenders are living. There's no direct public access, but the public can apply to the police for information about potential offenders who might be looking after their children. Members of the public can't directly apply to see the register, but if they're concerned about someone who may be looking after their children, they can seek from the police whether or not they're on the register. So in the United States, Megan's Law exists, which makes publicly accessible registers available, so anybody can search on the internet for the name of someone who's been convicted.
Currently, although all 43 police sectors have access to the Sex Offenders Register, 5 out of 6 public requests to gain knowledge of potentially dangerous individuals are denied. Therefore, the question could be posed whether we should follow suit of Megan's Law and have the Sex Offenders Register open to the public.
I don't agree with America just because they're putting the offenders in danger, and there would be abuse to those people verbally and physically, and I don't think that's right. I don't think any kind of abuse should be condoned, and I think even though that they've done a horrific thing that can't be condoned, they shouldn't feel in fear.
Well, Hannah there, who was abused by family members as a child. Oh, Chris, I want to come back to you. We heard Hannah there talking about no type of abuse should be condoned. She doesn't believe the system's broken. Do you think that the current system the UK has is effective with this disclosure scheme, or do you think it needs to come more in line with what is happening over in America, where anyone can access this information on a database?
From the point of view of being a survivor myself, I would like the list to be public. I believe that sex offenders should suffer for a lifetime, like a victim and survivor suffers for a lifetime, but not in the respect of revenge and having attacks on themselves, but being monitored constantly. the police and agencies knowing exactly where they are, what they're doing, and making them accountable for their every move, so that their life is uncomfortable, because the victim and survivor, the impact of the abuse on them is for a lifetime, and you can't take that away from them. So a lot of people that I've been in contact with for this programme to find for and against for this register being public, most of them say that the register should remain not in the public domain because of revenge attacks, because of people mistaken identities and being attacked, for people wanting to get revenge, and then those people getting revenge being put away for an act of revenge, taking them away from their children. So it's protecting not only the sex offender, but it's protecting the person who might think they want revenge, but later on might actually regret their action. So for me, does it go far enough? I think it does go far enough, and I think that because you have to apply to find out whether that sex offender is in your community and you want to protect your children, the police have control over who is gaining that information as well. So there is a protection there for the sex offender, but it's also a protection for the person who might want to get revenge, or people who want to take out acts of vigilantism on people.
I mean, it's that acts of vigilantism that's been a real concern.
Of a lot of people.
You had a previous sex offender, Michael Patton, in the US. He committed suicide after flyers were circulated detailing his previous sexual offences. I'm really interested about the information you've been collating from the people you've been speaking to about these pros and cons. But is there a concern that if we go down the American route, that you end up with mob rule? Yeah,
there is a lot of concern about that, about the mob rule. Some people, as I've said, do not really care what happens to a sex offender. They just don't, because they think if someone defiles a child, they deserve what they get. That's what some of the...
As a survivor yourself, how do you feel about that? Is that your viewpoint?
My viewpoint is that I would not do time for a sex offender because they've already done damage to me. So, and I personally feel that they will win if I took revenge out on them. So take a step back, let the police and the court system do their job. But there's a bigger picture. They are not getting the sentence that they deserve. There needs to be heavier sentencing to send out a clear message to sex offenders that it is not tolerated. If you think you're going to offend against a child or are offending against a child, you should know that there is a minimum stiff penalty. You do not get out for good behaviour. You serve your time, and your life is not going to be easy, because you are going to be made accountable to the authorities for the rest of your life. You are not going to get off that offenders register. You are going to be monitored, even tagged. That is my personal opinion.
When we look at the register in the UK as it stands now, it seems it's a bit of a postcode lottery when it comes to the granting of the requests for information. Yeah. We've had the NSPCC, for example, expressing concern between 2011 and 2014. Sussex Police investigated the murder of Sarah Payne. They made disclosures in 14 out of 193 applications. Do you think there needs to be better guidance for the police forces? Because clearly the way that different police forces are interpreting what they're allowed to disclose it is wildly different.
Yeah, I do believe that the police need to all the forces need to come together and get a standard format of criteria for people applying for this information, and they all should be adhering to that same criteria, because as you've pointed out, one of the forces only gave out information to 14 people. That's crazy. That is giving out a clear message that we are protecting the sexual offender, and it shouldn't be that way round. Yes, you do want to protect them to a certain extent, because if you don't, the sexual offender will go underground and we will not be able to keep contact of them. We need to know where they are, what they're up to, so that if anything does happen, the police and the agencies involved in that can get on and do what they need to do to protect children in the local area and to take that sexual offender back to the court system and back to prison if they've committed a crime.
Of all the pros and cons that you've looked at of moving towards a US system where there's full disclosure, what are the points that have really stood out for you? What's the argument that made the most impact?
That most survivors do not want this list to be public. That really took me back, because I would have thought that they would want to know who was in their area and who was doing what, but they are all against more abuse happening. Yeah, there are some people in the local community that like to get revenge, and they've got nothing to do with or haven't been part of being a survivor of sexual abuse. So they just want to go and do revenge on people. And that is not the society that we live in. That's why we have a police force to do the job that they're doing. So that really took me back, actually, because as a parent, I myself would like to know in my local area who's living next door to me. I would like to know. I would not personally take out an act of revenge on them, but I would still like to know where they are so that I could protect my children. And that has come across in a lot of people's responses to me as well, that we deserve to know where they are. If I'm going into a new relationship with somebody, I want to know if that person's a genuine person or are they going to be a threat to my child. Someone said to me, it's a shame they can't be microchipped, sexual offenders, so that the police know where they are at all times, because sexual offenders do go missing and the police cannot keep contact of every sexual offender that we have in this country. Some slip abroad to go on offending abroad, and we've got no jurisdiction in other countries. So it's a real mixed bag, and it's a very complicated subject, but it's a subject that we really do need to be talking about more.
And I know as a survivor yourself, away from the sex offenders registry, does more need to be done, and can more be done to support victims of sexual abuse?
Yes, lots. Where do I start? When you go through child sexual abuse, you often don't disclose straight away because you don't actually know you're being abused, because it's your norm, it's your reality. And until you know that what you're going through is different than normal, you then sort of like have an inkling of you're being wronged. Once you know you've been wronged, you've grown up by then, and you start having a few health issues. There might be mental health issues or physical health issues. You'll have symptoms, and you don't often know that those symptoms are linked back to the child abuse that you've suffered. But in every single case that I've known of, and every survivor that I've spoken to, they have got mental or physical ill health in some shape or form at some stage in their life. And they might be healthy for a couple of years and then they'll have a relapse. So the cycle of ill health for a survivor of child sexual abuse can come or go, or can be constant for some people. Mental health services are oversubscribed and underfunded. We all know that. Child sexual abuse is not tackled as child sexual abuse. It's tackled as you've got depression, you've got an addiction, you've got this problem, you've got that problem. They're not addressing the core root of the problem. So for my own example, bulimia, 3 hip surgeries, low self-esteem, depression. A friend committed suicide 2 years ago. My sister suffered clinical depression. My brother's got anger management issues. It is so far-reaching, but the root cause is the child sexual abuse.
Liz, thank you so much
for sharing. Support.
Thank you so much for your experience, sharing that with us. That is all we've got time for today. Don't forget, you can keep the debate going and give your opinion online by using the hashtag #Scope. Next week, it mobilised the youth vote during the Scottish referendum. So is it time we lowered the voting age in the UK to 16? I do hope you'll join me for that. But for now, good night.